Now the reality is very few people over 40 can hold a tuck planche, let alone do harder things like planche press up to handstand, handstand lower down to tuck planche. And I'm going to take you through the reasons why it's harder to train these skills or get good at these skills as we get older and what you can do about it. So if you're working towards your first tuck planche or just want to strengthen and condition the one you have, we first need to understand these 3 key areas that are making it very challenging for ourselves to get into the position, let alone hold the planche for any amount of time. So number 1, our wrists. Very common that we have limited range of motion in this extension because we spend so much time in flexion, but just putting weight into our hands could be challenging. So we need to make sure that we're doing enough prep work in our wrists to make them nice and happy. We need to explore positions and setups that's comfortable for our bodies because everyone's different. You might find that one hand needs to be slightly more externally rotated than the other. You might find that you need to go wider with the hands. You might find that you need to use things like P-bars because the hand is now in a neutral position as opposed to that extended position. And even make sure that you use bars that are separate and not fixed in position so you can find a position that's right for you. We also need to check your mobility in your upper back, your shoulders, your scapula, your spine. We need to check that you can go between retraction, so bringing the shoulder blades together, and protraction, so rounding the upper back where we shouldn't see the shoulder blades, both for easier repetitions where we're just moving up and down, more intense positions when we're on our toes, and conditioning holds where we're holding the position for a longer amount of time. So finding ways that we can open up the upper back, make each segment of our spine work now independently instead of working in big clumps or chunks. As we get older, we tend to move more like this instead of having the articulation to move our spine. So if we look what happens if I go into say a tuck handstand, see my back is pretty flat. But now when I come down into my tuck planche, I have to transfer that position into more of a rounded, protracted position in the spine. So making sure I can move between that flatter position and the more rounded, protracted position demands that spinal mobility, especially if I want to do it in the easiest, most efficient way. So doing the spinal foam rolling, doing articulations up against the wall. So I take all of my back against the wall like this. I peel the butt off, the low back off, the mid back, the upper back, go onto the head, I go back down again, upper back, mid back, low back, butt, and be able to roll up and down there. If that's too hard against the wall, I can do the same thing on the floor. So rolling up to here, now rolling down, trying to get my mid back to touch before my low back and my butt. Passively hanging every day with hands close together, or at least at shoulder width, not in this position like that. We want to be in this passive position like this, being able to articulate the spine here by doing arching scap pulls, active to passive hangs, moving up and down but keeping the arms straight. All things that are going to help with this scapular movement and spinal thoracic articulation. So we have the hands, we have the wrists, we have the scapula, the upper back, and now we need to talk about our tight hips. So most people struggle to do this, let alone this. We struggle to sit into a resting squat, and we struggle to bring our knees towards our chest in this tucked position. Now, what does that mean? If we can't get into this tight tuck position like this, then our body is going to stick out more. Now, when our body sticks out more in a planche, it increases the lever arm in that direction, and that's just going to make the planche harder. If I can go into a tight tuck like this, it's going to be much easier than a tuck like this. So just by being more open in the hips and allowing my chest to come to my knees comfortably is going to make the planche much, much easier. So working things like pigeon stretches, butterfly stretches, Cossack squats and other hip mobility exercises is just going to make it much easier to get into that tight tuck position. And the more you visit those positions in your training as well, making tight tucks, the more carryover you're going to have to that position when you want to use it in that tuck planche position. So now we have our wrists, we have our upper back scapula, we have our hips. So while we're working on improving that mobility, we can start working the position itself. Now there's two main movements that you should be focusing on. The planche lean, so I'm going to externally rotate my hands, make the wrists nice and happy. Remember, we need to find the position that's best for you. So it could be slightly wider, it could be slightly narrower, it could be slightly more externally rotated, it could be on those P-bars. I'm just going to place the hands down on the floor first. I'm going to push up to protraction. So remember that rounded upper back position. So we want that to be locked in. And now I'm going to go up to the top of a push-up position and make sure I've still got that protracted round back. Now it's good to video yourself here, it's good to look in a mirror, check that you're in this position, not in this position, and not in this position. I want the rounding, the energy, the power to be in that upper back position, in that scapula. That was all about that protraction. If that feels okay and I can hold good protraction, now I'm going to turn the toes over and I'm going to start to lean forwards even more and just really focus on holding this position, making sure the arms are dead straight, making sure I'm holding that full protraction, not collapsing at all anywhere, not in the hips, not in the scapula, not in the arms. And we just hold here for time. We want to build this position. This is something you can constantly work on while you're working towards your planche at any level. You're just going to move further forwards as you get more confident, more controlled, more conditioned in the position. And you'll constantly be refining the position as well. Because when you first start, your scapula is going to be a bit off, your hips are going to be a bit off, they're either going to be too high or too low, especially as the time goes on. So you might be able to hold it for 5 seconds and everything look great, but when you get up to 20, 25, 30 seconds, you might start to collapse and fatigue in the position. So we want to be able to hold this for a long amount of time, so say 30 seconds in that position, and obviously you're not going to be so far forwards with that longer hold. And then we also want to be able to hold it for 5, 10 seconds where we're really pushing our boundaries and pushing our limits with that. So I recommend you do both. You do some shorter times and some longer times, but to start with, maybe start around 10 to 15 seconds just to condition the position. Lots of check-in with the video that everything's correct and you're happy with the position. And then number 2, we need to be training the tuck planche itself. So we need to find out which progression we can do for enough time under tension that's going to give us a good response. So a good goal to start with is to get a 10-second hold in your position. So I'm just going to go into a tight tuck now. So I'm going to take my knees towards my chest. I'm on my toes. I'm going to externally rotate the hands. Same hand position that I was just using for that planche lean. And now I'm just going to push forwards and up. Make sure I'm in full protraction. So notice this is hard for me to talk, even though my toes are on the floor, because I'm pushing up as hard as I can. Again, I could turn the toes over. So there's my tuck position. Again, we can constantly refine that. We need to check on the camera again, see where the hips are relevant to the shoulders. We need to take our top off, check that our scapula is not poking out and it shouldn't be seen. So we should be rounding that upper back, shouldn't be able to see the scapula. We should have the hips in line with the shoulders and we should have dead straight arms. If that feels okay, we can make it harder by lifting one foot up. So go back into that position again, exactly the same. Lift one foot up. If that feels okay, both feet up. Now, if you can't get both feet up yet, there's a few options to allow you to play with that position, even if you're not 100% ready for it. But most people just need to spend the time on their toes to start with, trying to get as much weight and energy forwards while maintaining that good protracted position. But if you do want to play with some float time, stick a band around a bar or some rings so you can adjust the height up and down. You can play with the band thickness and you can play with the position your hands are relevant to the band. I'd make sure it's on the hips and not on the toes. And then exactly the same thing, tight tuck, protraction, and now with the band's help, we can hold there for a little bit longer and really feel what it's like to be toes off in this position. So make sure that you're doing something for those wrists, those hips, and that upper back. Now, if you need more help with your training, check out my app or reach out if you're after coaching. Check out this video and I'll speak to you in the next one. Thanks, guys.